They called him a small-time country lawyer who would quit when the money ran out. 7 years later, that country lawyer walked away with $13 million and sent their mastermind to the same prison as Bernie Madoff. Sometimes the most powerful stories begin in the darkness, literally. Picture an elderly woman, once wealthy and independent, sitting in her home as the lights go out. The electricity has been shut off. She's confused, frightened, and slowly losing her battle with Alzheimer's disease. What she doesn't know yet is that trusted financial advisors at a major bank have systematically stolen everything she had. This is the story of how one determined lawyer spent 7 years, working for $2.75 an hour, to bring down an entire criminal enterprise and restore justice to a woman who could barely remember her own name. When my brother first got the call to represent this elderly lady, he knew he was walking into a nightmare. Every major attorney in the area had either passed on the case or tried and failed spectacularly. The reason was simple: when you're facing a legal team that collectively charges $10,000 per hour, you're not just outgunned, you're facing a small army with unlimited resources. But the real genius of the bank's crime wasn't just the theft, it was the legal trap they'd built around it. Like most financial institutions, they'd buried mandatory arbitration clauses deep in their contracts. This meant their victim couldn't sue them in court, couldn't force them to reveal evidence through discovery, and even if she could somehow prove they'd stolen her money, they wouldn't have to pay it back. The criminals might face prosecution, but the bank? Untouchable. To make matters worse, after stealing everything, the bank had frozen the woman's access to her own accounts, claiming fraud, the ultimate insult. She couldn't even get her own bank statements to prove what had been taken. It was the perfect crime, almost. My brother became obsessed with this case in a way that worried our entire family. Here was a woman who barely understood her own situation anymore, her mind slowly stolen by disease, while these corporate predators had taken everything else. Her son just wanted the bank to pay, and my brother decided to make that his mission. While working full-time on paying cases during the day, he'd stay up half the night researching this one. Sometimes he wouldn't get paid for months. We calculated later that over 7 years, he made about $2.75 an hour for his work on this case. But something deeper was driving him, a sense of justice that wouldn't let him quit. Then he found it. Buried in obscure legal precedents and banking regulations, my brother discovered something the bank's high-powered legal team had missed. The bank had failed to keep proper copies of the original contracts. Not just missing originals, that was normal, but their copies had been altered. Words had been changed, pages renumbered, small but crucial differences that meant they couldn't prove the arbitration clause had ever existed. It was like finding a single loose thread that could unravel an entire tapestry. When he presented this technicality to the court, something unprecedented happened. The judge threw out the arbitration clause entirely. A major bank was being forced into the discovery process, the very thing they'd spent millions to avoid. The decision was so significant it was written up in legal journals across the country. The bank's response was predictable and desperate. They fought and delayed until the very last minute, then on the Friday before the Monday discovery hearing, they dumped over 200 boxes of documents on my brother's doorstep. Tens of thousands of pages, 72 hours to review everything. Most lawyers would have asked for a continuance, more time to process the mountain of evidence. But my brother had learned to expect dirty tricks. He rented a hotel room for the weekend, had a friend help him wheel all those boxes upstairs, and got to work. For 3 days straight, he lived on coffee and determination, reading through contract after contract, memo after memo, searching for the smoking gun he knew had to be there. And then, in one of the last boxes he opened, he found it. It was an email between a bank vice president and the bank's chief lawyer, the kind of internal communication that was never meant to see daylight. In casual, arrogant language, they discussed how there would never be a discovery process, so there was no need to destroy incriminating documents. They laughed about how the little old lady wouldn't be able to pay her lawyer since they'd frozen her accounts, calling my brother a small-time, country lawyer who would surely quit once the money ran out. But the most chilling part was their discussion of timing. They weren't just planning to wait out the legal process, they were counting on the woman dying of Alzheimer's before her accounts would be unfrozen. They were literally betting on her death. They had my brother completely wrong, of course. While they saw a small-town attorney without resources, what they'd actually awakened was someone with an unshakable moral compass and the patience to see justice through to the end. In that email chain, these executives had openly discussed several illegal acts, then documented the evidence proving they'd actually committed those crimes. Legally, they could have destroyed these records at the time, but they were so arrogant, so certain of their protection, they thought they didn't have to. Monday morning arrived. My brother walked into that courtroom carrying a single folder, no theatrics, no grand gestures. When he entered that email into evidence, the atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The bank's legal team, that $10,000 per hour army, immediately motioned for a recess. Within hours, they were offering to settle for what court documents describe as an undisclosed sum. My brother also secured $13 million in a separate part of the lawsuit. The mastermind behind the theft, the financial advisor who had orchestrated everything, lost everything. His home, the beach house he'd bought with stolen money, his financial license, even his wife. He was sentenced to serve time in the same federal prison that housed Bernie Madoff, convicted of tax fraud, bank fraud, forgery, and perjury. But perhaps the most fitting twist was yet to come. The advisor's motive hadn't just been greed, it was vanity. He'd used much of the stolen money to enhance his standing in the community, donating large sums to charities so he could attend galas, receive philanthropic awards, and be seen as a pillar of society. After his conviction, the court seized his assets, houses, cars, investments, and that money went into the settlement. The charitable trust established from the case elected my brother as its main trustee. So now, the man they'd called a country lawyer attends those same galas and receives those same philanthropic awards, distributing money that came directly from the sale of his opponent's seized assets. The thief who sought social status through charity is now broke, divorced, and imprisoned, while his victim's champion carries on the philanthropic work with money justice reclaimed. Sadly, the elderly woman at the center of this story passed away before the case was fully resolved, the disease that had made her vulnerable ultimately claiming her life. But her son lived to see justice served, and through the charitable trust, her legacy became one of helping others. The case established important legal precedents about arbitration clauses and banking fraud, protections that help safeguard future victims. And my brother? He proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon against institutional corruption isn't money or connections, it's the stubborn determination to never give up on what's right. In a world where corporations hide behind legal technicalities and bet on victims being too poor or too weak to fight back, sometimes it takes just one person willing to work for $2.75 an hour for 7 years to prove them catastrophically wrong. The country lawyer they dismissed became the architect of their downfall, turning their own arrogance into the evidence that destroyed them. Justice isn't always swift, but when it finally arrives, it can be absolutely devastating.